I wanted to ask you because I feel like they could go a couple different ways. Who do you think will, start in place of him while he is out?
I think to start, you're going to see Duncan Robinson in the lineup to begin the season. For one, that's what we saw in the preseason, but also I just think that's what makes the most sense from a rotation standpoint, especially with Caris LeVert wanting to be with him wanting him to be mainly their like second unit point guard and kind of the backup, point guard off the bench. I think he's going to be their sixth man all season if they can help it. And I think for Duncan, having that shooting in the lineup, someone who has length, even though, you're not going to have someone who can come in and play the Jaden Ivey role. So instead, bring in someone who can be an additive and have a strength in another way. Now, I could see Ron Holland slotting into that spot if he's shooting the ball well and is having a good season to start. And if Duncan Robinson is struggling to start the season, like I could see them experimenting with that starting lineup because I don't expect them to be stagnant if things aren't going well. I expect JB to experiment and be fluid, as we've seen him be, like throughout last season. Like he's not committed to anything like we've seen with certain coaching regimes, even if they lose 28 games in a row doing so. But nonetheless, like that's not this regime. So I think more than likely, again, it makes sense to go with one of those veterans you brought in the offseason. Duncan's really the one that, is the most like kind of plug and play because, catch and shoot 3-point shooters who can defend at a semi-competent rate is just the easiest player to plug into that spot. So, again, Caris, like I think Caris could go in and do fine in that role. It's just, I think with him really kind of being the catalyst and that number one scoring option for the second unit, I think it makes sense to continue to just bring him off the bench for now.
I think there's a lot you said that we could definitely dig into. I honestly think Duncan Robinson makes the most sense just from a spacing perspective.
Yep.
Cade Cunningham looked amazing in the preseason.
Best player in the league in the preseason, just off of unreal.
Yeah, like his conditioning looks amazing. He looked like he's gonna, be in those MVP conversations, like we talked about on your podcast a couple of weeks ago. But I honestly think Duncan makes the most sense just for the 3-point shooting. The savvy veteran that he is does give you a little bit more size in the back court. You're obviously going to have a Sar in there, so he can help with some of his defensive deficiencies that he does have. But part of me questions, and maybe this is just going down a whole different rabbit hole. I question, why wouldn't you put Caris out there just for the fact that he's another guy that can score at all three levels? Obviously, we know that, Trajan had mentioned that he wants to use him more as a lead guard with the second unit. But I mean, Sean, I feel like you could have a conversation and you could probably talk myself into having Caris next to Cade Cunningham in the backcourt. I mean, am I going a little crazy there or am I cooking?
No, I like, honestly, I see an argument for it. I mean, like just having having someone else who can take the ball out of Cade's hands, allow him to play more off ball. We see, Cade does a lot of his work in the post and, and could do a lot of really good stuff with his back facing the basket, coming off of screens. Like, I think there's something to be said, even though Cade's in really great condition, about him not having to do everything the hard way and him not having to work so hard for each and every shot. Now, what I can say is I think that there's some faith that Asar Thompson can alleviate some of those ball handling responsibilities, and he could perhaps fill in some of those duties in the starting lineup, so that potentially alleviates some of that pressure off of Cade. But Caris LeVert is, to your point, a more proven playmaker up to this point, as far as being able to, run an offense and operate kind of as a, at times like that lead guard. I definitely think if, because with Duncan, again, it makes the most sense as far as like what's the easiest, most natural day one move to make. But to your point, there's also like we know that the Duncan Robinson tail's out there. Like when Duncan's hitting threes, he's a great player to have on the court. We also know there's a lot of times where he's not hitting threes, and like shooters, like shooters are streaky. That's just what it is. They're not all Malik Beasley where they're just hitting threes just every single game. Even then, he had some rough nights, but nonetheless, like with Caris LeVert, at least you're getting something. Like you're getting like whether it's ball handling, like that ability to drive to the basket and kick it out to other players. Like like people knock like Caris LeVert for what he isn't, but don't appreciate him for what he is. Like he's not an all-star. He's not like a world beater. He's not going to be like one of your like he's not going to be like a third option on a championship team. But you know what he is? A quality NBA player.
Yeah.
And for 2 years and $28 million, you can do a heck of a lot worse than Caris LeVert.
I love that you said that because he does do a lot of things that impact the game that might not show up on the box score. The only reason why I would maybe kind of have a debate about between Caris and Duncan is Caris is probably the one player on this roster that JB Bickerstaff is probably the most familiar with. And I think JB has a pretty good understanding of what Caris is and what Caris isn't. And there's a trust factor there. And, dating back to their days to Cleveland, he may think that Caris next to Cade in the backcourt is a solution, in the short term. Or he may think, I need more, floor spacing out there with Asar and Durham being in the lineup. Obviously, we know Tobias can fill it up at all three levels, but having another floor spacer out there, I think would be really crucial just for the offense, just to generate points, not only from the outside, but also, backdoor cuts, lobs, stuff like that. But
yeah,
I think it'll be interesting. I do believe, though, the last lineup we got in the preseason is probably going to be the opening night starting lineup against the Chicago Bulls. If I had to guess, that's probably Cade, Duncan, Asar, Tobias, Duran. That's probably your starting five.
Yeah, the way that teams treat the final preseason game in the NBA is a lot different than how teams treat the final preseason game in the NFL. Whereas in the NFL, a lot of guys are shut down. They just kind of phone it in and are just ready for the season to start. In the NBA, like for all intents and purposes, for anyone that knows anything about theater at all, it's like the final dress rehearsal. Like they throw out like that is the closest thing to a regular season game as they're going to get. That's why Cade played like 2.5, 3 quarters in that preseason game at home. That's why they really like were trying the way that they were. So I definitely agree.